Before we begin, if you want the full continuation of these stories, more uncensored 18-plus Ancient BL content, extended scenes, and unlimited royal forbidden romance, you can join us on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. YouTube does not allow us to show or monetize everything freely here, so the deeper and more intense versions are waiting for you there. You can find the link in the description and pinned comment. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's step into the past. Shen died 1,000 little deaths every single day. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a hero. He was 23 years old, the last surviving son of a disgraced noble family, and currently, he held the most dangerous job in the entire empire. He was the personal scribe to the emperor. If you had asked Shen a year ago what his life goal was, he would have told you it was to sit in the dusty depths of the imperial library, cataloging old scrolls, eating his small bowl of rice, and pretending the rest of the world did not exist. He had perfected the art of being invisible. He was quiet, graceful, unfailingly polite, and absolutely terrified of drawing attention. Unfortunately for Shen, fate has a very cruel sense of humor. It all started on a rainy Tuesday. Shen had been temporarily pulled from the library to take notes during a military council meeting because the senior scribe had mysteriously caught a terrible fever, and by caught a fever, Shen was almost certain the old man had faked it to avoid the emperor's wrath. You see, this world was ruled by Emperor Tianyi, 28 years old, a man who had literally carved his way to the throne with a sword in one hand and a terrifyingly brilliant mind in the other. He was known as the Winter Dragon, cold, ruthless, unforgiving, and worst of all, the man was devastatingly, unfairly handsome. He had sharp, hawkish eyes, a jawline that could cut glass, and an imposing aura that made seasoned generals weak in the knees. There was a rumor in the palace that Emperor Tianyi possessed a dark martial arts technique. They said he could hear the heartbeat of anyone in the room, he could hear the blood rushing in your veins, he knew if you were lying, he knew if you were afraid. Shen didn't care about martial arts, Shen only cared about surviving the meeting. He knelt perfectly on his mat in the corner of the grand hall, head bowed, ink brush moving flawlessly over the parchment. He was an absolute picture of scholarly grace. But internally, Shen was losing his mind. Why is it so hot in here? Shen thought, staring intensely at his inkstone. Is someone going to open a window? I'm sweating. I'm going to ruin the paper. If I ruin the paper, I get executed. If I get executed, who is going to feed the stray cat behind the library? In the center of the room, Emperor Tianyi was tearing into his generals. The tension was so thick you could choke on it. The emperor was leaning over a massive map, and to get a better look, he impatiently rolled up the wide sleeves of his dark silk robes, exposing his forearms. Shen's eyes flicked up for one fraction of a second. Just one. And his brain immediately short-circuited. Mother of mercy, Shen's internal voice screamed. What is that? Why are his arms like that? Does he lift boulders for fun? Who authorized the Son of Heaven to have the forearms of a blacksmith? This is highly distracting. This is a hazard to the state. Outwardly, Shen didn't even blink. His beautiful, delicate face remained completely blank. He dipped his brush into the ink. Perfect posture, elegant movements. But across the room, Emperor Tianyi suddenly stopped speaking. The silence that fell over the grand hall was absolute. The generals froze. The guards held their breath. Tianyi slowly lifted his head. His dark, piercing eyes locked directly onto the quiet, unassuming scribe in the corner. Since his youth, Tianyi did have a gift. The rumors were true. His martial arts training allowed him to hear the subtle changes in a person's breath and pulse. Every day, he was surrounded by the deafening, frantic heartbeats of men who were terrified of him. Fear sounded sharp, fast, stuttering. But the heartbeat coming from the beautiful young scribe in the corner wasn't stuttering with fear. It was thudding, heavy, deep, and impossibly fast. It was the rhythm of a man who was deeply, intensely flustered. Tianyi narrowed his eyes. He looked at the scribe. He looked down at his own rolled-up sleeves. Then he looked back at the scribe. For the first time in perhaps 5 years, Emperor Tianyi felt a tiny, dangerous spark of amusement. You, the emperor's deep, smooth voice echoed in the silent hall. Shen's soul instantly detached from his body. I'm dead. It's over. He knows I looked at his arms. He's going to execute me for disrespecting the imperial forearms. Outwardly, Shen gracefully set down his brush and bowed until his forehead touched the cold floor. This lowly subject awaits his majesty's command. His voice was like soft rain, calm, perfect. Tianyi listened to Shen's heart absolutely hammering against his ribs. The contrast between this boy's serene, flawless exterior and his chaotic, racing pulse was the most fascinating thing the Emperor had encountered in his entire life. "Bring your notes to my private study tonight," Tianyi commanded. The generals gasped silently. Nobody was invited to the private study. Nobody. Shen closed his eyes. "Well, it was a good life. I hope the cat finds another patron." "This subject obeys," Shen replied smoothly. That night, Shen stood outside the heavy wooden doors of the Emperor's study. The palace was quiet, save for the sound of the wind rustling through the bamboo gardens. The air smelled of rain and rich sandalwood incense. Shen took a deep breath, adjusted his simple scholar robes, and stepped inside. The study was bathed in warm, flickering candlelight. Emperor Tianyi sat behind a massive ebony desk, reading a scroll. He had discarded his heavy outer robes, wearing only his inner layers of dark crimson silk. The fabric clung to his broad shoulders in a way that was entirely unfair to Shen's sanity. "Look at the floor, Shen," he chanted in his head. "The floor is safe. The floor does not have a jawline that could cut through steel." "Approach," Tianyi murmured, not looking up. Shen walked forward, his steps completely silent. He knelt beside the desk and offered the stack of notes. "Your Majesty." Tianyi finally lowered his scroll. He looked at Shen. Up close, the young scribe was even more striking. Pale skin, long dark lashes, and lips pressed into a polite, completely neutral line. But Tianyi could hear it. Thump, thump, thump. "You are Shen," the Emperor said softly, "the last son of the exiled Shen clan." Shen's heart skipped a beat, a momentary spike of old pain, but he nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. I am grateful for the mercy the throne showed in allowing me to serve in the library." "You are too intelligent for the library," Tianyi said, leaning forward. The scent of sandalwood and warm tea washed over Shen. "From now on, you are my personal scribe. You will attend me morning and night. You will pour my tea, you will read my memorials, and you will stay by my side." Shen froze. Morning and night? By his side? I'm going to die of a heart attack by next Tuesday. Outwardly, Shen offered a flawless, grateful smile. "It is my greatest honor, Your Majesty." Tianyi leaned just a fraction of an inch closer. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. "Is it Shen? Then why is your heart beating so fast?" Shen stopped breathing. The Emperor's dark eyes were locked onto his, searching, piercing, demanding an answer. "Think, idiot, think," Shen's mind raced. "Give him an excuse. A good one. An ancient, poetic excuse." "This subject is simply overwhelmed by the dragon's divine presence," Shen said smoothly, keeping his gaze respectfully lowered. Tianyi stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Then, slowly, a devastatingly handsome smirk played at the corner of the Emperor's lips. "I see," Tianyi whispered. "Then I suppose you will just have to get used to my presence." And just like that, Shen's quiet, invisible life was violently ripped away from him. For the next 3 weeks, Shen was subjected to what he could only describe as elegant torture. Every single morning, Shen had to dress the Emperor. Do you know how hard it is to tie a silk sash around a man whose waist is that infuriatingly perfect, while trying to pretend you don't notice the heat of his skin through his robes? It was agony, and Tianyi knew it. And oh, he absolutely knew it. The terrifying, cold-blooded Emperor of the realm had developed a new, highly specific hobby, torturing his beautiful scribe just to listen to his heartbeat spiral out of control. One evening, Shen was grinding ink at the Emperor's desk. The room was quiet. The only sound was the soft scraping of the inkstone and the distant patter of rain against the paper windows. Tianyi was reading a report, but suddenly, he sighed and rubbed his temples. "My head aches, Shen," the Emperor murmured. Shen paused. "Shall I summon the imperial physician, Your Majesty?" "No." Tianyi turned his chair slightly. "Come here." Shen swallowed hard. He set down the inkstick, walked around the desk, and stopped a respectful distance away. "Your Majesty, massage my temples," Tianyi ordered, closing his eyes. "Absolutely not. I resign. I am walking into the sea." But Shen couldn't resign. He was bound to the Emperor. Slowly, with trembling fingers, Shen reached out. His cool fingertips gently pressed against Tianyi's temples. The Emperor let out a low, rough breath of satisfaction, leaning his head back into Shen's touch. Shen's heart was hammering so loudly in his own ears, he was sure the entire palace could hear it. The Emperor's hair was soft, unbound, spilling over his shoulders like dark water. The heat radiating from the man's skin was intoxicating. Shen accidentally brushed his thumb against the shell of Tianyi's ear, and the Emperor suddenly opened his eyes. Dark, intense, and heavily lidded, Tianyi's gaze locked onto Shen's. They were inches apart. Shen could feel the Emperor's breath ghosting over his wrists. Your hands are shaking, Shen, Tianyi whispered, his voice dark and thick with an emotion Shen was too terrified to name. This subject fears his technique is lacking, Shen lied, his voice barely more than a breath. Tianyi reached up, his large, calloused hand wrapped around Shen's delicate wrist. He didn't pull Shen away, he simply held him there, his thumb slowly, deliberately stroking the erratic pulse jumping under Shen's pale skin. Your technique, Tianyi murmured, his eyes dropping to Shen's lips for one dangerous second, is exactly what I want. Shen couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt so thick, so charged with electricity, that one wrong move would set them both on fire. He wanted to pull his hand away, but at the same time, a dark, forbidden part of him wanted to lean down and find out what the Emperor tasted like. And if you are enjoying this forbidden royal tension, remember, the extended and uncensored 18+ continuation is available on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. The link is in the description and pinned comment. Before Shen could do something completely suicidal, the heavy doors of the study burst open. Your Majesty, General Lu strode in, drenched in rain. Shen practically threw himself backward, his face flushed completely red, his chest heaving. He immediately knelt on the floor, fixing his gaze on the carpet, trying desperately to lower his heart rate. Tianyi's expression instantly morphed from dangerous heat to freezing ice. He looked at the general with a glare so lethal that the man actually took a step back. This had better be important, Lu, Tianyi said, and his voice was so cold it could have frozen the sun. General Lu swallowed hard. Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty. We have received urgent reports. There is a rebellion brewing in the southern provinces. The rebel leaders have infiltrated the capital. They are planning something. Tianyi's eyes narrowed. The romantic, teasing atmosphere vanished, replaced instantly by the ruthless winter dragon. Increase the palace guard. No one enters or leaves without my seal. Yes, Your Majesty. When the general left, the room fell into a heavy silence. Shen remained kneeling on the floor, his mind racing. A rebellion. Assassins in the capital. His survival instincts, honed from years of trauma, flared to life. Get up, Shen, Tianyi said softly. Shen rose to his feet. He looked at the Emperor, and for the first time, he didn't hide his emotions behind a polite mask. His eyes were wide with genuine concern. Tianyi noticed. The Emperor stepped forward, closing the distance between them until he was standing right in front of Shen. He reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind Shen's ear. Are you afraid? Tianyi asked. Shen looked up into those dark, intense eyes. I am afraid for Your Majesty. Tianyi's hand lingered on Shen's cheek. The Emperor's thumb traced the line of Shen's jaw. It was a gesture so tender, so intimate, that it made Shen's chest ache. You do not need to fear for me, Tianyi said quietly. I have survived 1,000 blades. I will survive 1,000 more. The only thing I fear, Tianyi paused, his gaze dropping to Shen's lips again, is losing the things that belong to me. Belong to me. The words sent a shiver down Shen's spine. He wasn't just a scribe anymore. He knew it. Tianyi knew it. They were dancing on the edge of a blade, and the fall was going to be devastating. 2 weeks later, the Emperor announced he would be attending the annual autumn hunt. It was a massive political event. All the nobles, the ministers, and the generals would gather in the imperial hunting grounds outside the capital. It was meant to show the strength of the empire. Shen knew it was a trap. He could feel it in his bones. The capital was too quiet. The rumors of the rebellion had gone completely silent. It was the calm before the storm. On the day of the hunt, the weather was bleak. Gray clouds hung low over the mountains, and the wind was biting cold. Shen rode on a gentle horse near the center of the imperial procession, surrounded by guards. Up ahead, Emperor Tianyi rode a massive black warhorse. He was dressed in dark leather armor, a heavy black fur cloak draped over his broad shoulders. He looked like a god of war, untouchable and terrifying. Why does he have to look so good in armor? Shen sighed internally, clutching his reins. It's really distracting. I'm trying to scan the trees for assassins, and instead, I'm watching the way his thighs grip the saddle. I am a disgrace to my ancestors. When they reached the hunting camp, the atmosphere was festive but tense. Tents were erected, fires were lit, and wine flowed freely. Shen stood quietly near the Emperor's grand pavilion, holding a tray of warm wine. He watched the nobles bowing to Tianyi, their smiles fake, their eyes calculating. Then Shen saw it. A young servant, carrying a tray of arrows for the Emperor's quiver, was walking toward the pavilion, but the servant's footsteps were too light. He wasn't walking flat-footed like a commoner, he was walking on the balls of his feet, like a martial artist, like an assassin. Shen's heart didn't flutter with panic. It went dead calm. Years ago, before his family was destroyed, Shen had been taught the basics of survival. He wasn't a master swordsman, but he knew how to read danger. The servant approached Tianyi, bowing low. "Your Majesty's arrows." Tianyi turned, reaching for the quiver. At that exact moment, the servant's hand slipped beneath the tray. The glint of a poisoned dagger flashed in the gray light. "Your Majesty," Shen screamed. He didn't think. He dropped the tray of wine, the porcelain shattering on the rocks. Shen threw his body forward with explosive speed. He slammed into Tianyi just as the assassin lunged. The dagger missed the Emperor's chest. Instead, the blade sliced deep into the back of Shen's shoulder. Fire. Absolute, agonizing fire ripped through Shen's body. He gasped, collapsing into Tianyi's chest. Chaos erupted. The assassin didn't even have time to pull the blade out before Tianyi's own sword was drawn. In one fluid, brutal motion, the Emperor severed the assassin's head. Blood sprayed across the grass. Guards swarmed the area, shouting, drawing weapons. The nobles screamed in terror, but Tianyi heard none of it. His sword dropped to the ground with a clang. The Emperor caught Shen as his knees gave out, pulling the young man into his arms. "Shen?" Tianyi's voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't cold. It wasn't commanding. It was shaking. Shen looked up at the Emperor. His vision was blurring. The poison was fast. The edges of the world were turning black. Your sleeves are getting dirty," Shen whispered deliriously, staring at Tianyi's armor. "Shut up. Do not speak." Tianyi dropped to his knees in the dirt, clutching Shen to his chest. He pressed his massive, shaking hand over the wound on Shen's shoulder, trying to stop the dark blood from pouring out. "Physician!" Tianyi roared. The sound was so terrifying, so full of raw, unhinged agony, that the entire camp fell silent. "Get the physician now, or I will slaughter every single one of you." Shen smiled weakly. He let his head fall against Tianyi's chest. He could hear the Emperor's heartbeat. For the first time, it wasn't steady. It was frantic. It was terrified. "Ah," Shen thought as darkness pulled him under. "He really does care." When Shen woke up, he felt like he had been trampled by a herd of horses. His shoulder throbbed with a dull, heavy ache, and his mouth tasted like bitter herbs. He tried to move, but a heavy weight across his waist stopped him. Shen slowly opened his eyes. He was in the Emperor's private bedchamber in the palace. The room was dark, lit only by a few glowing braziers. He was lying on a massive bed draped in gold and black silk. And right beside him, half sitting against the headboard, was Emperor Tianyi. The Emperor was asleep, but just barely. His face was pale, dark circles bruising the skin under his eyes. He looked exhausted, devastated, and his large arm was thrown protectively across Shen's waist, holding him close, as if afraid Shen would vanish if he let go. Shen laid there, barely breathing, just watching the man. Without the terrifying aura, without the cold armor, Tianyi just looked like a man, a dangerously handsome, deeply exhausted man. Tian reached out slowly. His fingers trembled as he gently brushed a stray strand of hair away from Tianyi's eyes. Instantly, Tianyi's eyes snapped open. The Emperor froze. He stared at Shen, his chest heaving. For a long second, neither of them moved. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, Tianyi let out a ragged breath. He leaned forward and buried his face in the crook of Shen's uninjured neck. Shen gasped softly as he felt the Emperor's strong arms wrap completely around him, pulling him up against a broad, hard chest. Tianyi was shaking. The son of heaven, the winter dragon, was trembling. "Your Majesty," Shen whispered, his voice hoarse. 3 days, Tianyi rasped against Shen's skin, his breath hot and desperate. "You have been unconscious for 3 days. The poison, they said you might not wake up." Shen swallowed hard. He lifted his uninjured arm and, hesitantly, wrapped it around Tianyi's wide shoulders. "I am here. I am alive." Tianyi pulled back just enough to look at Shen. His dark eyes were wild, stripped of all their usual cold control. "Do you have any idea," Tianyi whispered, his voice dripping with dark, possessive intensity, "what I would have done to this world if you had died? I would have burned it to ashes. I would have drowned the capital in blood." Shen's heart fluttered, a wild, helpless rhythm. He knew Tianyi was listening to it. He knew the Emperor could hear exactly how much Shen wanted him. "Why did you do it?" Tianyi demanded, his hand coming up to cradle the back of Shen's head. "You are a scribe. You are not a guard. Why did you step in front of that blade?" Shen looked into those dark, desperate eyes, and finally he gave up. He stopped pretending. He stopped hiding behind his polite scholar's mask. "Because," Shen whispered, a sad, self-deprecating smile touching his lips, "I am a fool who spends his days terrified of you, and his knights wishing you would look at me." Tianyi stopped breathing. The emperor stared at Shen, the words washing over him, sinking into his bones. Then, a slow, beautiful, genuinely breathtaking smile broke across Tianyi's face. It was the first real smile Shen had ever seen on him, and it completely ruined whatever defenses Shen had left. "You are a fool," Tianyi murmured, his voice dropping to a low, sensual purr. "But you are my fool." Tianyi leaned down, and finally, after months of agonizing, slow-burn tension, the emperor captured Shen's lips. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate. It was hungry, filled with all the terror of the past 3 days, and all the hidden desire of the past months. Tianyi's hand tangled in Shen's hair, holding him in place as he kissed him deep and hard, tasting the lingering bitterness of medicine and the sweet heat of Shen's mouth. Shen melted against him. His injured shoulder ached, but he didn't care. He opened his mouth, letting the emperor take exactly what he wanted. Shen's hand gripped the fabric of Tianyi's inner robe, pulling him closer, chasing the warmth of his skin. When Tianyi finally pulled away, they were both breathless. The emperor rested his forehead against Shen's, his thumb gently stroking Shen's flushed cheek. "You are never leaving my side again," Tianyi whispered. "It wasn't a request, it was an imperial decree. You will not hide in the library, you will not bow to me like a stranger, you will stand beside me. Do you understand?" Shen looked at the man he had once thought was a monster. He saw the fierce, unyielding devotion in those dark eyes, and he knew his quiet, invisible life was gone forever. And to his surprise, he didn't miss it at all. "I understand, Tianyi," Shen breathed, using the emperor's given name for the very first time. Tianyi shuddered at the sound of his name on Shen's lips. He leaned down and kissed him again, softer this time, lingering and sweet. Over the next few months, the imperial court underwent a terrifying purge. Emperor Tianyi dismantled the rebellion with ruthless, calculated precision. Nobles were exiled, corrupt ministers were executed, and the power of the throne was absolute. But amidst the bloodshed and the politics, a strange, beautiful rumor began to spread through the palace. They said the winter dragon had found his pearl. The terrifying emperor, who used to freeze rooms with a single glance, was now frequently seen walking through the royal gardens with his personal scribe. They said if you looked closely, you would see the emperor subtly adjusting his pace so the scribe wouldn't have to walk too fast. They said the emperor refused to drink tea unless the scribe poured it. And the court officials quickly learned one very important rule of survival. You could anger the emperor, and you might lose your position, but if you disrespected Lord Shen, you would lose your life. Shen never officially took a title. He preferred his simple robes. He preferred sitting by the emperor's desk, grinding ink and reading scrolls. One warm summer evening, long after the court had emptied, Shen sat by the window of the imperial study. The moon was full, casting a silver glow over the koi ponds outside. He was reading a poem, completely relaxed, when he felt heavy footsteps approach behind him. Strong arms wrapped around his waist, pulling his back flush against a broad, warm chest. Tianyi rested his chin on Shen's shoulder, inhaling the scent of his hair. "Still reading?" Tianyi murmured, his voice rumbling deep in his chest. "Someone has to be the civilized one in this relationship," Shen teased softly, leaning back into the embrace. Tianyi chuckled, the sound vibrating against Shen's spine. The emperor turned Shen around, trapping him gently between his arms and the windowsill. Tianyi looked down at him, his dark eyes soft and full of an affection that was entirely reserved for one person in the whole world. He reached out and, very deliberately, rolled up the sleeves of his dark silk robes, exposing those strong, scarred forearms. Shen's breath hitched. He glared at the emperor, his face flushing a bright, beautiful red. "You are doing that on purpose." "I have absolutely no idea what you mean," Tianyi lied smoothly, a wicked smirk playing on his lips. He stepped closer, pinning Shen against the wood. "But your heart is beating very fast, Shen. Tell me, are you afraid?" Shen reached up, his slender fingers grabbing the lapels of the emperor's robes. He pulled Tianyi down until their lips were just barely brushing. "Terrified," Shen whispered against his mouth. Tianyi laughed, the sound bright and free, and kissed him under the moonlight. For the rest of his life, Shen would complain about the emperor's arrogance, his stubbornness, and his ridiculous forearms. And for the rest of his life, Emperor Tianyi would listen to Shen's heartbeat, perfectly content in the knowledge that out of all the men in the empire, Shen's heart beat only for him. If you want the next part, the uncensored continuation, and more unlimited 18+ Ancient Royal BL stories, come join Spicy Ancient BL on Patreon. The link is waiting for you in the description and pinned comment.